You are all welcome. Today we are going to tell about some doctors who knew the murderer. Dent phobia is exactly what it sounds like. Fear of the dentist. Dent phobia can be caused by past negative experiences or fear of losing control. However, for most people, going to the dentist is a fairly mundane task. At worst, they may find a hole. Let's face it, paying bills is never a pleasant experience. But you would never expect that the person crawling inside your mouth could actually be a brutal murderer. Or should it be a killer drill? Here are 5 cases of killer dentists. Stay till the end of the video. Number 5. Gelnnon Engleman. Well-respected St. Louis dentist Gelnnon Engleman was not the most handsome of men. In fact, it would probably be fair to describe him as physically unappealing. Yet Engleman somehow managed to manipulate several of the women in his life into taking part in his elaborate murder for money schemes. After divorcing his first wife, Ruth Ball, he continued to give her money and dental care, and they still hooked up. Ruth's new husband, James Bullock, was also one of Dr. Engleman's patients. Not long into the marriage, Bullock was shot dead. Police suspected that the doctor and/or the grieving widow had some part in it, especially when Ruth collected on a $64,000 insurance policy. However, Engleman had an alibi, and there was not enough evidence against Ruth. He later used his powers of persuasion on his dental assistant, unfortunately named Carmen Miranda, to convince her to marry a man she didn't particularly care for, Peter Halm. When the bridegroom ended up dead, courtesy of a bullet to the head, his widow paid some $10,000 of the $75,000 insurance to Engleman. When Arthur and Vernita Gussewell were shot to death in 1977, their son Ronald inherited about $250,000. When he, too, was shot dead a couple of years later, that money went to his new wife, Barbara, as did a $190,000 life insurance policy. Before marrying Ronald, Barbara had been dating Engleman. There was also a business associate of Engleman's, Eric Frey, who ended up at the bottom of a well that blew up. Frey, who had recently married yet another of Engleman's former girlfriends, was a partner with Engleman in a failing drag strip venture. Sophie Barrera threatened to take Engleman to court over $14,500 he owed her for lab work she'd undertaken for him. A car bomb quickly put a stop to any need for Engleman to pay her. Number 4. Charles Adelsan. Fort Lauderdale dentist Charles Adelsan was charged in connection with the 2014 murder of his brother-in-law, Dan Markel, a prominent law professor at Florida State University. The arrest happened in April 2022. It was alleged that when Markel was involved in a highly contentious divorce from his wife Wendy, her brother, Charles Adelsan, hired 2 hitmen to kill Markel. Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera, who prosecutors say gunned down Markel in the garage of his home as he talked on his phone, were allegedly hired through Catherine Magbanua, a former girlfriend and employee of Adelsan. Prosecutors claim that they were paid $100,000 for the hit. Garcia was convicted of first-degree murder and is serving a life sentence for the killing. Rivera is serving a 19-year sentence after pleading guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for testifying against both Garcia and Magbanua. Wendy Adelsan apparently told authorities her brother joked about hiring a hitman as a divorce present but had decided to buy her. Number 3. Colin Howell. In May 1991, when nurse Leslie Howell and policeman Trevor Stewart were found dead in a parked car with a pipe running from the exhaust into the vehicle, many suspected they had taken their lives because they were having an affair. However, others knew that their respective spouses, Colin Howell and Hazel Stewart, were the adulterers instead. With their spouses out of the way, Colin and Hazel went public with their relationship 3 years later, only to have it fizzle out by 1996. Howell remarried and went on to have 5 children. Meanwhile, Stewart married another policeman. However, the profoundly religious Howell had a guilty conscience that he couldn't shake. When his eldest son died in an accident, and he lost £350,000 in a scam, he believed God was punishing him. It drove him to confess. Howell admitted to police that he had drugged his wife and ran a hosepipe from the exhaust of his car through the house and placed it in her mouth. When she unexpectedly awoke, he suffocated her with a cushion. Next, he loaded his wife's body into the trunk of his car, then drove to the Stewart's house, where Trevor had already been drugged with tranquilizers. And once again, while being gassed, the intended victim woke up and fought for his life, only to be finished off by Howell. He then drove both victims to a vacant property, arranged the two bodies, ran the pipe from the exhaust into the vehicle, then scattered photographs of his and Leslie's children around her body. Howell was ultimately sentenced to a minimum of 21 years in prison. Despite also being convicted, Stewart has denied any involvement, claiming that she feared the homicidal dentist. However, Howell revealed they had plotted the murders together, telling the jury, "I may have been the lead partner in the waltz, but Hazel was dancing in cooperation." Number 2. Gobriel Wortman. Deranged Nova Scotia denturist Gobriel Wortman fatally shot 22 people and set fires in 16 locations throughout the Canadian province in a killing spree that spread over 2 days in April 2020. It is currently the deadliest in Canadian history to date. The rampage was carried out by Wortman as he dressed as a Royal Canadian Mounted Police (RCMP) officer, driving a replica police cruiser. He began in the small rural seaside village of Portapique and ended some 100 kilometers away over 12 hours later with his death at a gas station outside Halifax. According to authorities, the rampage appears to be, at least in part, very random in nature. One of those killed was RCMP Constable Heidi Stevenson, a 23-year veteran and married mother of 2. She was shot and killed while responding to the active shooter incident. While some of the victims were deliberately targeted by Wortman, many were simply random victims, either in the wrong place at the wrong time or even attempting to assist Wortman, mistaken in the belief that he was an RCMP officer. This is one of the most senseless acts of violence in the province's history, Nova Scotia Premier Stephen McNeil stated. "We're in shock that such a thing could happen here in Nova Scotia." Number 1. James Ryan. In 2022, Maryland-based oral surgeon James Ryan was accused of supplying his girlfriend with addictive anesthesia solutions and even administering them, ultimately leading to her fatal overdose. Sarah Harris, aged 25 at the time of her death, was a former patient of the 48-year-old dentist. Police later described how shortly after moving in with Ryan, Harris developed and sank into a serious addiction involving multiple controlled dangerous substances provided by Ryan. Authorities built their case through autopsy findings, interviews with Harris' friends and relatives, and using 10 months' worth of text messages between the couple. "I feel so disoriented," Harris texted Ryan, to which he replied, "It's the ketamine. The combo may be the Neurontin," Ryan responded, referring to both an anesthesia and pain medication. Ryan was likely addicted as well, as it was alleged that some of Ryan's employees found him deeply sleeping and unresponsive in his office and used ammonia-smelling salts in order to wake him up. Authorities felt that Ryan did not intentionally kill Harris, instead charging him with second-degree murder, given the extreme indifference to her life by continually bringing her the drugs and setting up a home delivery system. They instead allege that as an oral surgeon, he knew how dangerous the combination of drugs was.